Welcome to our podcast, Geeks, We Are Your Fathers. We're three very proud geek dads and we're here to talk all things technology, gaming, science fiction and more. In this episode, we're focusing on the topic of Mid Life Crisis, discussing projects and purchases. Plus, we have an exclusive interview with Mayku founder Ben Redford. Hello and welcome to episode 7 of Geeks, We Are Your Fathers. I'm Robbie.
Hi, I'm Pete.
Hi, I'm Dave.
So according to Wikipedia, a midlife crisis is a transition of identity and self-confidence that can occur in a middle-aged individual, typically aged 45 to 55. So while I've still got a fair few years to go yet, you guys are both in peak crisis territory. Have either of you hit it yet?
I think so, mate. It's it happens to us all, doesn't it? It's that realisation that your life is slipping away, you're no longer young, and there's things that you wanted to do and you've not done. Like, I've not jumped out of a plane yet, and I've always wanted to do skydiving, and my sister, who's a couple of years older than me, has done 2 skydives now, and I did a bungee jump when I was 20, I think, and I always said I'd go back and do another one, but I haven't had a chance to do that yet either. So yeah, just, I don't know, Dave, maybe you feel the same. It's just there's something in maybe it's like a little clock ticking away that's reminding you that you're not quite as agile and as young as you used to be, and you should be doing all these things that you've not got around to doing.
Well, I certainly feel the age. And certainly, all of a sudden, it's just getting up from the sofa and the knees go clunk and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, making
I feel that
noises.
Yeah. See, the interesting thing is midlife crisis implies that you've kind of grown up, and then you're kind of reverting almost. And I feel like I've never actually properly grown up. So, so there's an interesting question. So Robbie read out midlife crisis. So midlife crisis could be 2 things, couldn't it? It could be doing something that is something that belongs to somebody who's younger.
Yeah.
And making yourself look at what's it, doing it. Or there's always the other
TikTok,
definition. Yeah. Or there's the other definition, which is taking up a hobby or some kind of pastime.
Yeah.
Fully expecting that this is going to be the next greatest thing in your life, and you do it twice and then forget about it. And that's what I find is, being the age I am and being able to afford things that I couldn't necessarily afford when I was 20, that maybe taking up some of those hobbies, that's an expensive pastime. You take up these things, or you might take up these things and you think, I'm going to do this, and this is going to define the second half of my life. And you do it twice and you've got 2,000 quid's worth of stuff lying around that you get touch again. I mean, there's always that danger. But I don't know. I have a few things that I've done that maybe should have been done when I was younger. So back in the day, I had a sports car. I had an MR2.
Oh yeah, you did.
That was, it was great. It was Mark II MR2.
Was it red?
One. It wasn't. It was black. It was black. So at least I had some kind of self control, and it was great. I loved it. But then I've always enjoyed driving cars, so it wasn't really a big thing. And then I've got my guitars, my music, and I go through phases of this. So it's not necessarily just midlife, but I go through phases of. Maybe I just listen to one piece of music and I think, brilliant, I'd love to be able to play that. And I start practicing, and then I start having these wonderful dreams that I should find a band and we should go playing. And you find that as an aging bass guitar player, you've got 2 choices. You either find another group of middle-aged so-and-sos who are growing in the middle and getting a bit fuzzy-headed, and then all of a sudden you're into that very sad territory of a bunch of 48, 50-year-olds trying to relive their youth with guitars, but the paunch is getting in the way of the full Kiss outfit.
Yeah.
Or, so the alternative is, do I then go and find a band? Here I am, 48 years old, with a bass guitar that's more expensive than really I ought to have because I'm not that good.
Than a
do
car.
I go and find a band of 20-year-olds who are living the whole rock and roll lifestyle? And there's me saying, well, I need to get home at 11 because I've got to get the kids up for school tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
So there's which do I do? And that to me is a crisis. So I always go through this cycle of I start playing, I start practicing, thinking this is brilliant. Why don't I do this more? And then the minute you start thinking about getting a band, and then all of a sudden reality hits you fairly in the back of the neck, and you think, I can't do that. I'm either too fat and too old to keep up with the youngsters, or do I really want to hang around with another bunch of people like me?
Yeah.
I've seen a nice version of that actually not long ago. It was at Bonfire Night last year, and I went to a big 360-degree firework display in Leicester, and they had a band on beforehand, and I thought they were really, really good, and they were playing all the old sort of ska music, and it really it didn't quite fit because they were all about 14 or 15, and then it clicked to me straight away when I looked to my right, and clearly their parents were stood there strumming every chord with them and singing every word along with them, and that was there. Obviously they decided at some point, we can't do this anymore, but we can get our kids into this, and they were really good.
Ska. You know what? They was it Blink 182? Like they were like one of the pioneers of like the new era of punk, weren't they? You know, maybe these guys are going to kind of bring in the new era of
really
ska
good.
for the 20s.
Have a look on Facebook. They're called Subculture. They're a really, really good little band. But yeah, it did make me laugh when I seen their dads and their mums. They were really enjoying it.
Two-tone for the 21st century.
Exactly.
Oh God! You know, so you're talking about your kind of relived youth, Dave. Cars. I guess I used to mess about with cars when I was younger, and I remember one of the cars that I got when I was a student. Actually, I got a Mini, and there was a guy who lived behind my my girlfriend, or who's my wife actually, who lived behind my in-laws, and he had a 1982 Mini City, and it was a mint condition. It had hardly been driven. It was automatic. And I basically acquired that, and I dropped out the transmission. Actually, dropped out the whole engine and gearbox, and replaced it with a manual gearbox and engine, and put on some mini light alloys, and then pimped it up with a big stereo and stuff, and drove that around with a massive, great big Pico exhaust on the back, making a right old racket. And I think, you know what? I really want to do that again. I really want to get myself like a Mini, and do something, relive the kind of. What's the name of the film? Flipping hell, that's got
Italian Job.
Supposed to blow the bloody doors off. Italian Job, yes, and relive that. But I used to buy Max Power magazine, and I was building car stereos. I used to like build subwoofers out of MDF. So I used to create a box out of MDF, put like a tube in it, which is basically a bit of drain pipe, and then put some acoustic cloth around it, wrap it together. And wire it up to a couple of amps and a crossover unit, and I had a head unit in my car that it was a tape deck. Blimey, that was before CDs, right? and it had one of those removable plates as well, so that no one could nick it. And in fact, I think I had to upgrade. Yeah, I had to upgrade the alternator because it used to drain the battery. These 2 amps, even when you were driving along, right? Just like, and actually, I made it slower.
Wasn't a Mini a 6-volt vehicle to start with?
I think it was a regular kind of 12-volt mini battery, but I mean maybe the old
might have got that wrong. It shows how much I know about cars.
Well, but I mean this was when this car had like points, right? It wasn't electronic. It was it was old, but you know it was such a great laugh. And I'm thinking I'd love to do. Have you seen these car rallies like Bangers to Barcelona or the Mongol Rally? Oh. You know what?
I mean, they do an Italian Job rally. Apparently, a
whole
bunch of people drive minis down to Italy. Yeah.
Oh, you know,
which would be a laugh.
Be great. Yeah. I remember actually I was in Paris a few years ago for a long weekend with my wife, and we were just crossing the Champs-Elysees, and then all these sort of pimped up cars came down, but they'd actually got bits of cardboard, and they'd modelled all like aerofoils and skirts and had these stereos going. And they'd like hand painted it. It was brilliant. I thought, you know what? I want to do that. I want to get myself like an old Mini and pimp it up, put a CB radio in it, you know, get a big stereo. It'd just be brilliant. I would really love to do that and modify it. You know, a bit like Pimp My Ride, but, you know, not quite so sophisticated.
You should do it. Yeah, do it at the other end of the scale. Go for see if you can get the cheapest car you can find and see how far it can get you. Because I've seen something I was reading last year. In fact, I think it was around the football in the Champions League final, and there was Liverpool fans who managed to find a car for, I think it was £45 they paid for it, and they drove it all the way to...
It got them around all the away games.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know what? I follow this guy on Facebook. He's a travel writer. I think his name's Simon something. I know exactly who you mean, and it is really good. They literally pay 40 quid for that car, don't they? And they all get down there and back in it. And it is great, you know, but it's a bit like, say, the Bangers to Barcelona, or they used to do Staples to Naples, Staples Corner in London, down to Naples in Italy. And you literally, it's like a big cannonball run type rally where you get a bunch of people, and it's not really a race. Well, it is and it isn't, but it's more about that. They go in convoy and they stop and they have parties every night, and I'm probably too old for that. I'll be in bed by 10, Dave, like you, mate.
See, that's the thing. I love the idea of it, but I couldn't keep up with the lifestyle because you want a decent amount of sleep. Secondly, I would be useless when it came to fixing the cars. I mean, to quote Oddball out of Kelly's Heroes, I just ride them. I don't know what makes them work. Much to the fact that I've married into a family who owned a garage, and they're all both my brothers-in-law are fitters. My father-in-law is a mechanic. He knows everything about cars. I can barely change the oil, so I love the idea, but I can't. I can't actually bring myself to doing it. That falls into that category of here is something I'm going to go and spend a lot of money on doing, and then I turn the spanner twice and go, that's defeated me. That's enough of that. Go and have a cup of tea. That's fine.
But older cars are easiest. I mean, I'm not a mechanic either. I mean, I used to service my own cars and change the oil and upgrade the spark plugs, and all that kind of stuff. But now it's all electronics, right? So I mean, you open the bonnet of my car and you look underneath, and it's a hybrid, and it's just like I wouldn't know where to start. The whole thing's sealed in anyway. You can't even get to the engine or even the plugs or anything. It's just completely
crazy.
They
make it very difficult to get anything.
Oh yeah,
they do. And you've got to take the whole car apart just to get to like a component that's sort of at the front of the grille, and so I would love to do that. And I think half the excitement is that thing breaking down, right? And then you try and fix it, But you're right, you do need somebody with a bit of mechanics knowledge. And I know one or two guys actually that we could probably tag along and take with us. But what an adventure, eh? I mean, the Mongol Rally, for example, that goes across Mongolia and all through Europe and Mongolia into Russia and wow, I mean, there's a guy at the office actually in our London office. He did it this year or last year, I guess now last year, and he had a whale of a time. And he just bought, I think it was like a mini Metro, rubbishy old thing that really old, and it got them through. Where they were going. But
this sounds like a Geeks We Are Your Fathers challenge coming up here.
Yeah.
See how far we can get across Europe. But obviously, being fathers, we have to take our children, so we need to find an old bus. Because it's always much more difficult trying to fix it at the side of the road while there's a child at you saying, are we going yet? Are we going yet?
Yeah, Larder Weaver Estate or whatever.
Not quite the Mid Life Cris-Quiz dream car, that is it?
Yeah. Well, we're saying that Larders. My father-in-law was when he had a garage, he was actually a Larder dealer. So he was a bona fide. He had the franchise, bought Larders, sold Larders for many years, and I mean they were ridiculously dirt cheap. So there was a place for them. You can take the mickey out of Larders, but they were functional. You could fix them with a hammer and a spanner, and you basically were there. But the funniest story he used to tell was about, he used to get, this is back in the 80s, whilst the Iron Curtain was still up. He used to get phone calls during the week, and this swarthy Russian voice on the other end saying, you have larder. Yeah, we got larders. Yeah, we got some second-hand larders. We come by larder. And the next thing you know, these couple of big guys off some of the ships out in Felixstowe. So these Russian guys, they'd come in on the ship, they'd come and bring a big wedge of folding money, and they'd
suitcase
drive away.
Of money, yeah.
Well, very nearly. They'd drive away in this second-hand larder, and they'd disappear. And then a couple of months later, you get another phone call, you have larder. And it was some time before he worked out exactly what was happening. These guys were taking the larders, they were driving them to the ship in Felixstowe or Lowestoft or wherever they docked. They'd take a crane and dump the larder onto the ship, and they'd spend the trip between Felixstowe and Murmansk or wherever they were going, stripping the bits off for spares, because it was worth more in spares in Russia than it was as a car.
You're kidding.
So apparently there is on the floor, on the sea floor of the North Sea, there's this trail of dead larder carcasses between Felixstowe and Murmansk, because apparently this happened all the time. He'd chat to the other larder dealers. Oh yeah, we get their phone calls. So these guys are, because it was a window, the window glass and the seats and a couple of the bits of the the piping and whatever, that was worth more than taking the whole car back.
Oh my goodness! I mean, that's a bit like if you Land Rovers, the old Land Rovers now.
Oh yeah.
You can't get them, but people literally, because they just bolt the panels, so they nick them and they unbolt everything. They're worth more for spares, aren't they? It's like oh my gosh, that's incredible. But do you remember, what was your first car, Robbie? What'd you buy? What was your first car?
I had a Rover 214.
Oh yeah, I remember those.
I had one of them actually, GTI version.
Until I completely messed up the suspension going straight over a roundabout stupidly at one point.
Trying to do a Dukes of Hazzard.
Exactly. Yeah. A little bit.
Oh my goodness. Well, what about you, Dave? What was your first car?
I was boring. I when I bought my first car, they'd started out with these flexible payments. You paid lower per month than a balloon payment at the end. So my first car was actually a brand new Vauxhall Corsa. So I never went through this whole clunkers and wrecks.
Oh,
my brother my brother was the one. He had a string of minis, and he had a old Granada at one point. He had a Maxi, Austin Maxi at one point. I'm told he was in the Navy, was my brother, and he knew lots of people. I'm told at one point he had, I think it was a Renault 4, and he killed it on the Bovington tank course. So he was the one that went in for the clunkers and the wrecks, and used to try and do them up. I was much more boring.
Yeah, my brother was a bit like that. I remember he had an Astra as his first car, but it was a very, very old model. I think my granddad bought it at an auction for him, and the seats looked like aeroplane seats. You had to pull the string to get the seats to go back, and it didn't even have a radio that worked in it. So he used to actually have a handheld radio that he would just put on his passenger seat and play cassettes through, just so that he could have music while he was. I still thought he looked cool while he was driving to school. But
I had one of those actually. My first car was a Mark 1 Astra, a bit like probably what your brother had, Robbie. It was a 1.2.
The square ones, the one that was designed with a ruler.
Yes, had awful brown seats. It was terrible, and I don't even know. I think it did have a cassette in it, a very, very basic one, but. Yeah, it was awful. That was my first car, and then my wife, who actually I met at sixth form originally, she used to drive around in a 1303, a 1972 Volkswagen Beetle, which was completely souped up, and she had a beautiful car. But that was so noisy you could hear it coming from like a mile away. But she used to have a problem with the demister, so she used to have a portable hair dryer. She used to demister the window with the hand dryer. And you could actually at one point see through the floor plan, because it had all rusted away. So one of the corners, it did pass the MOT luckily, but yeah, she'd really done that. We used to go to a lot of the Beetle rallies and stuff, but I was still into that was when I got into Minis actually, just after that, because much as I like Volkswagens, I actually preferred Minis better. So I was like into Minis, she's into her Volkswagen Beetles and stuff. So but yeah, over the years I've had all kinds of cars, and probably more than I can remember, but most of them, you buy them cheap, you run them into the ground, and you buy another one, right?
But it's always the surprise ones that you remember, because I used to love, I had a little Saxo VTR Turbo, and it was like a go-kart. I loved it, and you could drive it around anywhere, and it had great speed for the size of it. But that was the one that I really enjoyed driving. And then I worked my way up that I always wanted an Audi Q5, and I managed to get one just over a year ago. And it's great, and I love driving it, but there's still times I would love to go back out in the Saxo again.
Yeah, they're just like, they were a great little boy racers car. I had I say various cars, and they're just so much fun. I just tinkering around with them, and I had car stereos that were worth more than the car. It was just really fun times, and I do miss those days. But I don't unfortunately have a lot of space out where I live now. I'd love to get another little car, but I'd soon get moaned at, I think, if I left it out the front of the house or on the lane or whatever. But
that's like the guy that we used to work with, Rick. He used to have at least 2 cars on the go at all times in his garage.
He did.
And then 2 or 3 scooters or Lambrettas in there as well. I don't know how his wife managed to put up with that, but his answer to everything was, I just bought 2 of them and I welded them together. Okay then. No, I won't be buying that off you, Rick.
Oh, the best car that I had, I think I bought not an Audi, it was a Volkswagen Polo that had a full body kit on it, and it was pearl white. It had matching wheels, it had a full back sunroof, and the skirt on it was so low I couldn't go over speed bumps more than about 2 miles an hour. And a mate of mine, he had an RS Turbo, which he had nicked about literally 5 or 6 times. They just kept nicking it, and he had all the, he even had a thing on his driveway that pulled up to try and stop people driving away, but they would just get an angle grinder and take it off or whatever. But that thing was amazing. He had that was super fast, and he that was at the time when there was sort of quite a lot of street racing and stuff up near Stockley Park. Not all from where you are, Dave, actually near you.
It is. Yeah, it's just around the corner.
And there was a lot of street racing in the 90s up there. But wow, I mean, today I just don't think kids go through that. They do what you've done, Dave. They get their little black box and they get a new car and they pay
cheaper insurance.
Yeah,
we used to, because I remember as well when I was younger, it was always sort of local B&Q car park was the go and race around a couple of lorries that were parked in the middle. Whereas now, if they want to race, they just play a game, and it's all on the computer.
That's true enough.
I mean, it is a lot safer, in fairness. But I definitely wouldn't be moaning about that with my kids. I'd much rather they played it on there. But it was a great time when you were younger and you'd spent so long trying to get your car fast, and then you just left for dust, or somebody else is just speeding off ahead of you. But
I've got to say, I'm getting a new picture of Pete in my head. Than Pete, I've known you for 16 years now. I had no idea that you were one of those floppy head boy racers back in the day.
Mate, I will send you some pictures of my car one of my Polo, for example. Yeah, I did have the curtains haircut and the
That's a big step, Pete, from there to with the whole idea of the milk float. Whatever happened to that?
Well, so Dave, you may not know this, but I've got this, milk floats from the 70s. Anyone younger than about 30 probably no idea what a milk float is, but I would love to get a milk float, pimp it up, and then drive it from London to Paris, go around the Arc de Triomphe, and then off down to somewhere in the south of France and on to Spain. And I got inspiration actually from some guys. It was a Radio 4 programme a few years ago. It was called Three Men in a Float. And they basically got a milk float, an old milk float from the 60s and 70s. And they basically drove it from Lowestoft to Land's End. Guess how long it took them to do it? Lowestoft to Land's End. How long do you think it took them to do that?
It's going to be weeks at 3 miles an hour, isn't it?
Yeah.
It took them a month, right? Literally 15 miles per hour top speed, 25, I think it went 25 miles a day. Now, bearing in mind, I mean, this was a few years ago, you can't just plug this thing into the mains, right? So you've got to either go to like a forklift truck depot to charge this thing up, or they made friends with people along the way. And actually, if you know anything about electrics, in your house, if you've got a cooker, it's a 32 amp socket.
Right.
Okay, so you can... They were wiring in positive and negative to people's cooker sockets, right? They weren't taking them off the wall, and they were charging this thing up. And then it's just great. I don't know whether the TV the radio series is available, but there is a book. It's called 3 Men in a Float, and the guy who was doing the electrics, he was an Indian guy, and he said there's two ways to do electrics. There's the English way and there's the Indian way. And the Indian way was basically taking the 32 amp socket off and plugging in the and having been to India,
France.
Is
your French good enough? Bonjour, monsieur.
Oh, bonjour, monsieur.
I want to plug this into your cooker.
Just an Englishman shouting at the door, plug this in cooker, please.
So, so I've got an idea to do that. I'd love to do it, even if you put on some solar panels, try and extend the range. And because Tesla's come along now, support the whole thing, right? They want to do a 1,000,000-mile battery, don't they now, right? So, I mean, where's the fun in that?
Yeah, where's the fun? Yeah, it was big lead-acid batteries in the bottom of a milk float. Yeah, it's kind of been bypassed, isn't it, nowadays?
Yeah, but to drive around the Arc de Triomphe in a 1960s milk float would just be absolutely amazing,
I've walked around the Arc de Triomphe. I wouldn't want to drive around there in a tank.
Well, yeah, I must admit I've never driven around it, but if I do get me Mini pimped up or whatever, that'll be the first place I go, I think, down the Champs-Elysees, round the Arc de Triomphe.
I want your first time to be in the milk float, Pete, while you're dropping off pints of semi-skimmed on the way.
So, well, the other way you could do it on a mobility scooter, couldn't you? There's the other thing I thought. You could do an adventure on mobility scooters and see how far you could get, but...
Again, that's another one of the Colin Firth specials, isn't it? Didn't he get
did it? I know he pimped one up.
Was it about 45 miles an hour? Something like that?
I think it was 100. I think if it was 100, he got a world record, didn't he?
I knew he got it fast.
But
it was on, that one made it onto Top Gear at the time, I remember that.
Yeah. Yeah,
we made the land speeder out of the golf buggy as well. He's the man to have on this project.
Oh, golf buggy. Yeah, that's another thing you could do, isn't it? So, but yeah. So, crazy adventures. Mid Life Crisis adventures, right? Milk floats.
I've got a feeling this one is definitely one to be continued anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
That sound means it's time for our special guest interview. And this week, friend of the podcast, Alison Hutchins, has been speaking to Ben Redford.
I'm delighted today to be joined by someone I always love having a catch up with, Ben Redford, the co-founder of Mayku, whose product, the Formbox, is a really versatile desktop vacuum forming machine which has opened the technology up to makers everywhere. Firstly, thank you for taking the time to catch up today, Ben.
My pleasure.
For the benefit of our listeners, can you just explain a little bit about yourself and how you first became interested in making things?
So yeah, my name's Ben. I started Mayku with my business partner about 5 years ago now, with this sort of dream to democratize manufacturing and build the world's first desktop factory. So we saw a lot of people making 3D printers, but not a lot of the other uh, manufacturing processes that you might find in larger scale factories overseas. So we decided we'd go on this mission to build the world's first desktop factory and connect them all together. And that's how Mayku was born. And I got into making things. I can't really remember a time when I wasn't into making stuff. I was like, I was just one of those kids that was always drawing or building things. And I think that just carried on and carried on. I think one of my earliest memories of being at nursery is like painting a house or something, I think. And then, yeah, as I got older, I got more and more into it, and I was very lucky to work on some of the very early Tim Burton models for his early films. So Nightmare Before Christmas, and A Corpse Bride. The actual workshop that made them was about 10-15 minutes walk from my house. So I used to sort of go and harass them until they let me come and do some work experience. And then I think that was my first job when I was about 14, which was really fun. So that's probably how I got into making. And then, yeah, it just seemed to be a bit of a natural progression from there.
Wow, Tim Burton, that's a bit of a claim to fame. We've never touched on this before, but I'm a massive Tim Burton fan, kind of bar Planet of the Apes. I'm not a fan of that. But anyhow, I just digress.
Awesome.
So obviously you had the idea and you've got a very entrepreneurial spirit anyway. You then went on to run a really successful Kickstarter campaign to gain the initial funding for Mayku. But this wasn't your first Kickstarter, was it?
No, it was actually, what was it, my third, I think? And well, yeah, third personally, I guess. And then I sort of consulted on some and just sort of run some, helped some people run some. The first one, as you would expect, is a complete commercial failure, and thank God it was. It was an internet connected smelly robot called Ollie, or Ollie Factory, and it was an open source Twitter based sort of little robot with a face on the front of it that, depending on your Twitter activity, would produce smells in the air around you. So, if you got a nice tweet off your partner, then a smell of roses might be released into the air, and then if you got a tweet off your ex-partner, maybe like a smell of rubbish would be released into the air. It's completely ridiculous. So we put it on Kickstarter with not any clue of how to manufacture it or how much it would feasibly cost. It's my first job out of uni at a very interesting agency called Mint Digital, who were very kind enough to sort of give me the opportunity and the safety net to be doing quite sort of weird experimental stuff back then, when Kickstarter was just in the US as well, and they had a US office. And it wasn't doing so well, so we made Polly to complement Ollie, and Polly gave you sweets for your tweets. So she would release a gumball. She had the same form factor and sort of general kind of personality as Ollie, and she would release gumballs based on your Twitter activity. And yeah, like annoyingly, they didn't get funded, but they did end up winning the Ideal Home Show Young Inventor of the Year award, which is obviously very, very prestigious. And we then went, as part of that, we went on to Sunday Brunch, which is Sunday terrible hangover television, live. And we took Ollie on there and Polly, to show that why we'd won this sort of Young Inventor of the Year competition. And we put in, I think it was the hashtag that they asked for on live TV, and it ended up trending worldwide for about 8 hours, which was quite exciting. But it got so big that it started sort of trending with pornography spam bots attached to it as well. So it would have my company's name, Mint Digital, with some porn spam bots attached to the end of it as well. So I sort of went into the office on Monday morning after live TV at Sunday Brunch, to sort of mixed applause, I guess. Very happy with the publicity, but not too happy with the sort of porn hashtags that followed it up. But it was quite funny. And then my second Kickstarter was with Mid Digital as well, and that was a tiny little Instagram projector called Projectio, and that was actually pretty successful. Did really well. I found a company in the US who could turn digital files into 35mm slide film, so sort of backwards to what you'd expect. Instead of digitizing files, they took digital files and made them into old school film. And I got really interested in it because I've always loved taking stuff apart, which I think is a fairly similar trait of a lot of makers or product people. And I just sort of worked out that you could probably make one of these old slide projectors with the modern sort of LEDs. You could probably make them tiny. So I stuck, I think it was like a 5x5mm Instagram picture in front of one of these on one of these slide films, which this company in the US managed to prototype for me. And I put one into this little LED, and I can remember being in my bedroom and lighting it up and seeing this thing sort of throw onto the wall about 1.5 meters by 1.5 meters in like beautiful clarity with really rich colors. So we put that on Kickstarter, made it look sort of like a miniature, really old school kind of like classic Dieter Ram style design. It did really well, and that was really fun. But shortly after that, I was actually when I was manufacturing the Projectio, I was in China and was out in these factories and realized that they were using vacuum formers, massive ones, to make molds and to make product prototyping much faster, and to make the packaging, blister packaging as well. So it was a very versatile machine, and that's when it sort of clicked. And I'd built a vacuum former before, when I was about 14, just out of like a Hoover and a bit of tape and some wood. And so I think that's when it clicked, and I decided when I got home and Projectio was all manufactured and sort of selling, that I would start Mayku and make the form boxes the first one. I got back and quit my job and managed and sort of built the first prototype, and managed to convince my business partner Alex to leave Mid Digital as well, after sort of showing him this prototype, and sort of that was the beginning.
How difficult was the decision to leave behind the security of a job to focus fully on getting your own business up and running?
Well, it was easy because I was stupid at the time. I think that was. I think that's one of the. I don't. I think I've got a kid now, and I'm not settled. But I've got like a part. I've got responsibilities. But I think one of the benefits of sort of naivety is that you do stuff that would be considered really brave, but you don't really understand what you're doing. And so I think it would be a lot harder for me to do it now. But then the flip side of that is that I can't ever imagine myself working for someone else. So yeah, hopefully Mayku continues to work and everything's all right. But yeah, the decision was actually weirdly easy. And I think that was massive. I think that was also massively thanks to Kickstarter and those platforms, because whereas before you needed a lot of capital to invest in tooling and to actually get a product out into the world. And with Kickstarter, you could test ideas really quickly, physical ideas really quickly, which is what excited me, because I sort of cut my teeth in my first job was out of uni, was in a digital agency, and the general tech world are very good at building something very quickly and testing it. The whole idea of an MVP. And so I sort of had that in my head of being like, okay, so that's how they build websites in this way that refines them very quickly. How can we do that with products? Because, to make a product is very expensive. And I think at the time you had quite a nice sort of like a mishmash of two separate worlds coming together, which was you could 3D print stuff and prototype stuff very quickly. And you had this way of then putting with Kickstarter of putting that prototype out into the digital world and saying, you know what, we're trying to build this. This is how much money we need for it. If we don't get that money, great, because it means that there's no demand for it and we're not wasting our time. And that's basically how we approached it. We were like, let's give a few things a shot. I had a list on my wall in my shed. And the form box was the first one, just purely because I'd made one before when I was young, and it seemed like something that I could feasibly do. So I was like, I'm not a trained engineer. I'm not, I'd sort of put stuff into production before, but it was just exciting, and it seemed to align with my own values and my own sort of beliefs about how sort of manufacturing could be. Even though a vacuum former it's a pretty simple device, it was like that's a really good place to start. So it didn't really even cross my mind that much at the time to jump ship and start my own thing. I think 5 years later, I'd think about that very differently. And I'm sure my partner would too. But she's been very supportive, so I can't complain.
You guys at Mayku used the shared office space at the Makeversity at Somerset House. How did that give you a bit of a hand up in getting started?
So it was another one of those things. So I sat next to the girlfriend of one of the founders of Makeversity, when I was at Mint Digital. She was a freelance designer there, and we were talking about me, in hushed tones about me leaving and starting my own thing. And she said, you should talk to Joe. And so I did. And when I first got to Makeversity, there was nothing in there. They just got the keys, basically. And so they gave me free rent for the first 6 months, with a space and an address in Strand. So it really helped give us the leg up in terms of it made us sound really really special to have like a W1 postcode and like Strand, London on your address. But it was basically like a big basement with just like space to make stuff. I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but that's actually quite rare in London. There's a lot more sort of digitally tech heavy scenes here and a lot more clean spaces. It's quite hard to, apart from sort of the hack space in East London. There's a lot more now. There's Building Blocks HQ, but that's out in Walthamstow, and there's a lot more messy spaces. But at the time, that was really something that was valuable to us. Is just to have that sort of space where there was a couple of machines and just the space and opportunity to do kind of weird stuff. And also just like, the community that were in Makerversity and the people who passed through it. It's like kind of like coffee shop vibe or tea house vibe of the sort of late 1800s. There was just always so many interesting people there that you could, as a sort of, not really knowing what you're doing, it was always easy to just go and grab someone that did, and just be like, can you tell me how to solder that? Or like I remember one guy there, he was an engineer, he's an incredible guy, called Lek, and I was chatting to him one day, and he was just telling me how he was the guy that basically built the I can't remember which part it was. It was like one of the parts of the Batmobile bike for the real stunts that they did, and I was just completely blown away. And he helped a lot with the design of a roto molder, because we built a roto molder at the same time as we built a vacuum former, but we never launched because we had them both fairly well done actually. I think it was about 2 weeks or 3 weeks before the Kickstarter campaign, and we were just like, it's really stupid to try and launch two things at the same time when you don't really know what you're doing. And so, yeah, we killed the rotomolder, but he was instrumental in helping us build it.
Did you ever feel a little bit out of your depth in that kind of environment when you didn't have an engineering background as such?
I think it's always good to feel a little bit out of your depth, to be honest. You want to go just over the edge, so you're sort of teetering. I always find that's the best and the easiest way to learn. Or for me it is anyway. Just I think that, the support networks that we've had along the way have always been really, really, really useful. And very sort of instrumental now in helping us, and especially our investors as well. Like, we get a lot of help and advice from them, but they're just like, I think that's just something that you can't really sort of define or put your finger on. Sometimes it's just those people that you have around you, and how confident you feel in yourself. And I think most of the time, like back then especially, it was definitely a sort of not ignorance is bliss, but I think not knowing led you to not be fearful of it. So there was never much discomfort. Yeah, I don't know. I've always sort of straddled the line between kind of like having a bit of a technical brain and a bit of a sort of artisty / illustrator, product designer type as well. So I think it's quite comfortable actually to sit in that space and be able to look at it from both sides, because it tends to, if you need knowledge on something, you can go and ask someone, or you just try it for yourself, and if it messes up, it messes up.
Finally, what's next on the horizon for Mayku?
So we're building our next machine at the moment, which I at once can't contain my excitement for, but also can't actually talk about, annoyingly, because we're doing something very exciting and very secret, because it's new, and it's a new process that we've sort of developed in-house, which is incredibly cool. And we're aiming to launch that probably sort of March, April 2021. So yeah, we're just trying to sort of navigate the pandemic. Factories and pandemics are quite interesting. So we're just trying to sort of navigate through that, and then hopefully you'll hear more. But again, that'll be open to pre-orders, as it would be. So yeah, you should hear about that very soon.
Right, brilliant. Well, I really hope that I am actually the first person to hear about that. That would be really cool.
Absolutely.
Thanks ever so much for taking the time to catch up today, Ben. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. Pleasure's mine.
So normally at this time of the show, we would all agree to disagree about a geeky subject. But today, we're going for a slight change as I test my fellow hosts in our Mid Life Cris-Quiz. Bad pun, sorry about that. So researchers recently polled 1,000 men aged 40 and over to find out what it's like to go through a midlife crisis. And I've got a list in front of me of the top 10 things and activities that men in the UK have bought during a midlife crisis.
I've probably got me on my shed of shame, Robbie, right?
Without a doubt.
Got 'em, yeah.
You will both have 3 chances each to guess something that features in that top 10 list. And the person who gets the most correct answers will be awarded a Design Spark Mid-Lifetime Achievement Award. If it's a tie, then we'll go to sudden death and we'll see who is crowned the winner. So, Dave, heads or tails to see who goes first?
Okay, tails.
Heads.
Okay.
It's on you. So, name one of the top 10 things that men buy during a midlife crisis.
Like, I think I'm going to go for racing bikes, like road racing bike, middle-aged men in lycra running around in their races or riding around in their races. I think that's got to be pretty high.
So an overweight Tour de France type thing.
Well, yes!
Oh, God.
Not me, I'm a mountain biker. But yeah.
Might be surprised to know that a new expensive bike actually only makes it to number 19 on the list. It doesn't
You're
make the top
kidding
10.
me? Really? Wow.
Really.
Okay.
You'd have been better off saying something else, Pete.
Well, that's fine because I mean I pay people good money not to have to go out in lycra. I mean it's something you don't want to see.
So, Dave, what's your first guess?
Well, my first guess would be it's got to be top of the list. 2 wheels, motorbike. I'm not interested myself, but motorbike must be up there.
So, normal bike, cycling bike was not on there, but a motorbike does make it in at number 5. So that's an early lead for Dave.
Only
So
number 5
the
though.
fifth.
Surely that's
Yeah.
Isn't that the top? I don't know. Surely that'd be the top of the list. Anyway,
Hasn't made it top.
okay.
But you have got one. So 1-0 to Dave.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, Pete, you need this one to level.
Right, so what would I buy as a middle-aged man that's not... Oh, blimey. Oh, it's a difficult one. Well, I'm going to go with games console.
Games console has sneaked just in there at number 10. So an Xbox, PlayStation / games console. And the new PS5 is being leaked this week. So
It's this week, next week, isn't it? Yeah.
yep. So hopefully we'll all be able to buy one of those soon enough.
Yeah, that'd be good.
So 1-1. Dave,
Okay.
can you
Right,
retake
but
the lead?
maybe it's back to what I know. It's an electric guitar.
An electric guitar. Does that make it on there? No, it doesn't.
No.
Not at all?
A musical instrument is only number 18 on the list.
Okay.
It doesn't
Oh,
make it into the top 10.
Okay, I've got another one then.
So all to
How
play
about-
for.
So I guess the traditional midlife crisis is a red sports car, isn't it? So we'll go with sports car of some sort.
So that's the one that I would definitely think of when we say midlife crisis. And I think it's what we've just talked about for the last 25
Yeah.
minutes. Yeah, it only makes it to number 3. But you are on the
Number
list.
3.
So, Dave, you need this to level it up
Come
and take
on.
it to sudden
Oh,
death.
this is getting tricky because everything that I thought would be surefire top of the list is oh heavens, what is all right, this is a bit out of left field. Surfboard.
Doesn't make the list.
No.
I just sold mine.
So that's the end of the midlife crisis. Just, no, it's all right. I've been doing that for years.
No, because I needed a new one.
Did you sell it to a guy?
Now the truth comes out.
So, in backwards order, so 10 was the games console, which you had. Number 9 was a gym membership.
Oh, of course.
Yeah,
Number
that's what's
8 was a trip travelling around the world.
Okay.
Number 7 was a new tattoo.
Oh, of
right,
course.
okay.
Yeah.
6 was tickets to a concert or gig. Number 5 was the motorbike, again, which you had. Number 4 was designer clothes. Number 3 was a sports car. Number 2, which I thought one of you would have got, was a new gadget. And
That's a bit random, though, isn't it?
It's a bit vague, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
number 1 is a holiday.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
So the top
That's not
thing is a
midlife
holiday.
crisis, surely. Okay.
I
Unless you're going
suppose it
bungee
depends where you're
jumping
going, or if you're
in New Zealand. Yeah.
if you're a 65-year-old heading off to Ibiza for the weekend, then I suppose you could see that.
You're not.
as well.
Your midlife crisis
midlife
not at
crisis.
65. You don't live to your 140
Well, it
odd, do you?
depends. Who knows? Things are changing.
Yeah.
Well, that's just my bad maths. One man that was polled actually said that he blamed his midlife crisis for buying a £2,000 Armani suit. Another said they'd spent £70,000 on a car, and one midlife crisiser even bought an £1,800 albino python.
What?
So yeah, all sorts in there.
Okay.
I was going to say, it's reliving the leather jacket phase, but I don't know if that comes under the heading of designer clothes, but middle-aged men in leather pants is something that it's not a mental image that I want to dwell on.
No.
So now it's time for our final section of the show, as we each put forward our nominations for Geek of the Week. Each of us nominates one person who deserves the title, and then we all agree on the winner. So, Pete, do you want to go first this week?
Yeah, so I guess on the theme of tech, I was reading the BBC website this week, and they were talking about people who are, especially during this lockdown period, about gadgets they're still using that are like really old. And there was all kinds of things from like toasters to sewing machines and all that kind of stuff. And then I stumbled across this guy who was mentioning it called Martin Mander. And he's got a really cool YouTube channel called Old Tech New Spec. And what he basically does is he takes old kind of gadgets and he kind of pimps them up and gives them kind of a bit of a modern twist. So he does all kind of things with games consoles or toasters, and he uses Raspberry Pis, and he's just created some really awesome things. So you should go and check out his site. But there's like an old dial phone in there, and he's kind of pimped that up with LEDs and made it into a timer. So it's just really cool, some of the stuff he's done. So go and check that out. He's called Martin Mander, Old Tech New Spec, and middle-aged guy himself, does some really cool things. Yeah, so he's going to be my nomination for this week.
I'm definitely going to have to check that one out, because maybe I am going through a midlife crisis. Maybe it just means my life expectancy is shorter. But I've been spending the last few weeks of lockdown building a pub in my garage since the pubs have closed. So I want to get it all ready just in time for the new football season starting in a couple of weeks. And I've been doing exactly that. So I've been looking at how can I take some of the old things from a pub and make a new version of them. So using Raspberry Pi, I've done the whole games console side of sort of like an arcade machine to put in the pub. But then the next thing I'm trying to work on now is to create a small jukebox that I can then run using Spotify or MP3s through the Raspberry Pi. And I've seen a few different approaches to it, and I've worked on a couple so far, but nothing's worked properly as I want it to yet. But I'll have a search through what Martin does as well and see how he goes about some of the things he does, because that might help me.
Yeah.
What about you then, Dave?
Well, I've been reading a lot about space. We've been talking about Apollo recently, and I've been reading books, so I'm on a bit of a space kick, if you see what I mean. And I know we've talked about astronauts before as Geeks of the Week. Pete came up with one, I think, on our first show. But I read something today, actually, about a lady called Kathy Sullivan, who was the first woman to make a spacewalk involved in the NASA. She's now just been the first woman to go to the deepest point in the ocean, the Challenger Deep, which is 10 kilometres straight down, something like that. And I've got a little boy who's 9 years old, and he's interested in science. And so the idea of the Challenger Deep and the deepest point of the oceans is something we've talked about. We've looked at a map and where is the deepest point in the ocean. So this is a lady who's 68. If we're talking about midlife crisis and the best of your life behind you, here's a lady who's 68 years old. She's just done the Challenger Deep after having been an astronaut and a technology leader and the first woman to do a spacewalk. That's pretty geeky to me. I think she deserves some kind of recognition for being the first person to do both.
She's actually the first nominee that we've had that I've actually got a Lego figure of her looking at me right now, which is very strange.
Outstanding.
You've got a Lego figure, really?
Yeah, because my daughter's got one of the Lego. There's a Lego set that's Women of NASA, and she's featured as one of the characters on there. So I've actually got that Lego figure staring at me right now while you were talking about it. But yeah, that's a really good nomination. My nomination, really selfishly this week, is McDonald's. because they finally reopened their drive-throughs all across the country, albeit with a £25 order cap, which is probably good for my bank balance. But our house has had 2 very happy children this week and probably 2 even happier adults. So it's not quite in the normal geek style, but they are definitely the geeks of the fast food world. And yeah, my nomination is McDonald's, because I've been able to think of little else most of this week.
How else did you queue? How long did you queue for to get that?
So the day that it actually opened, we got a tip off that it was open, despite them saying that it was only available for takeaway. So we thought, let's be clever and get up there before everybody finds out about it. But we were still queued for half an hour just to get into the drive-through. But then I took the kids at the weekend, and we got straight in. So it's calmed down quite quickly. But I do know that some people were driving half an hour, 40 minutes to restaurants that were open when the ones weren't open in their own towns. So I never quite reached that level. I just waited until they opened, but I've definitely made the most of it in the week since.
Did you see that just on the drive-through thing I was reading? I'm sure I read it somewhere about how you could potentially be fined for using contactless payments on your phone going through a drive-through because you're using a mobile device whilst at the wheel.
Wow,
I mean, it sounds a bit crazy,
Really?
right? Yeah. I mean, I can't believe that. I mean, surely, I can't remember where I read it, but you're thinking, actually, that is some kind of stupid law that actually somebody might try and fine you for.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I'm not sure how it works, because I suppose on the other side of that is you're not on a public road, are you? It's private property when you're
That's a good point.
in the drive-through.
Yeah.
So I suppose there might be a way around it. But,
On top
Fake
of that,
news.
what's more dangerous,
Yeah.
just handing your phone over to make it beep, or rooting around in the glove compartment trying to find the change?
yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, especially at the moment, they're not even taking cash, are they? So
No,
it's a case of
true enough.
What's cash? I don't even use it. Yeah.
yeah. Well, you did go for a while without using it, Pete. That's when I thought you were having your midlife
Right.
crisis. Was that time when you decided to take the year without
Yeah.
spending any cash?
Do you know what? I forgot about that, and I actually got 6 months in, and this was. I mean, now I could do it no problem. This was like 3 years ago. And did I write? I think I wrote out on LinkedIn about it. But yeah, literally, I started January the 1st, and I said I'm not going to spend any cash. And it was quite early on with contactless payments, and I didn't actually have my phone enabled. I didn't have an NFC on my phone at the time, or my watch, which I can now pay with. But it was. I think it's really easy if you're not a parent, because being a dad and a parent and having to pay things just at school, like you're going to the school fete and having to use cash at the school fete, or giving them a bit of pocket money to go and buy something, or it's just no substitute for that. But I mean, I think as an adult with no kids, you could have done it quite easily.
Especially in a city, I think it would be
Yeah,
much easier to do.
Apple Pay and all that, absolutely. But where I actually failed again is it's just like little things like going out to the seaside and having an ice cream, and none of these places they all take cash. So we did cheat a bit, because when we went, my wife ended up paying for it, but I had nothing. So although I wasn't spending the cash, I thought, well, it is cheating a bit. But if my wife's buying the kids ice creams, I'm not going to have one, and I'm not going to spend the money. So I kind of cheated that way. But also, we went to there's a place up the road from us. It's like a hippie commune, I guess you could call it. It's where the Rolling Stones used to hang out in the 60s. It's called Braziers Park, I think, and it's kind of like a living hippie commune, and they teach, like, they do all kinds of courses and stuff. It's an amazing place, and it's all self-sustainable. But they every year run a May Day fair. Unfortunately, not this year because of the COVID-19 situation. But they have this amazing local beer and hand-reared pork and sausages. I needed some food and a beer, and I just ended up parting with cash at that. So I got 6 months in and buckled. It was just getting too complicated. So, but I reckon I could do it now, no problem. Not a problem at all.
Well, I think the world is getting more set up for it anyway because of the situation. More people want you to get to that point. So if you tried it now, I think you could probably go pretty much the year without worrying about it. Even your ice cream van is getting towards that point, are they not?
Especially
Well,
now.
Yeah, they are. You know what? One thing I've got as well, I've got this little thing called a Ping It, right? And it sits on actually on my watch, which has got NFC in it, but it's actually a Barclays thing. It's like a little chip that looks like it's been cut out of your card, and it goes onto a little thing that I slip onto my watch strap. And it's like almost you load money onto it, and it's contactless. Anywhere that takes contactless payment takes it. So it's great for kids. So I gave my kids these for a while before they got their own bank accounts and cards. And you can literally, just contactless payment stuff, and I think up to the same value of whatever it is. That's £45 now, isn't it? But and it only lets you spend what's on it. So if you lose it, you've got the app and you can control it. But you know, so if someone nicks it, you know, they're not going to nick your bank card or anything. They're really quite cool. So I've always got that on my watch, and I often use that to pay for stuff because my NFC enabled watch on my Garmin, I have to go into a menu and turn it on with a pin and then zap it, which is absolutely useless if you're trying to do something in a hurry, like go through the tube or whatever. So yeah, they're really good. If you've got kids and you want to give them contactless payments, look at Ping It, PIN.
I'm going to go look for that.
GIT,
like
Ping It. Oh, it's really, really cool. And so you just literally set an app, you load money onto it, and then they can literally spend it. You know, and you can see what they're spending and where they're spending it. And it's all digital, so you don't have to worry about cash or losing it. And if you do lose it, I think you can just switch it off. But yeah, it's really cool. Check it out.
And I'm sure your kids are just like mine. That the ability to pay for something themselves that's a real big thing for them, isn't it?
Yeah.
I remember what it was like when I was given money and I could go and buy something myself.
Have you not?
Yeah.
Have your kids not got the Go Henry thing, Dave?
But that we do. We don't use it much.
Yeah, it's a good concept, but it's never quite as good especially at the moment, they can't spend it on anything anyway.
Exactly.
It's handy for birthdays and things because people can just transfer money over without having to put cash in cards. But yeah, that's the thing again, as you said, Pete, you can get away with most things. It's those little traditional things like putting money in birthday cards and stuff like that you kind of have to get out of a habit of.
Well, yeah, I mean, how do you do a whip round for somebody who's having a baby or they're leaving?
Yeah.
Or
but to be fair, you can do it all through PayPal, and it would be just as easy. The last time I remember at work, we do a collection every year at Christmas for homeless shelter, and this year we did one, and a lot of people were saying, I haven't got any cash. Have you got a card machine? And we're thinking, well, at the first time we thought as if we're going to have a card machine, but by the end of the third day that we'd been in the canteen speaking to people, we thought actually next year it probably is worth us having a card machine because people will just pay £1 or £2 or £5 on their card because it's you used to being able to do it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Geek of the Week. Who's going to get it this week? My vote is for Kathy, I think. That's absolutely incredible, especially as you said, at the age she's at, to still be doing things that most of us would never even dream of being able to do.
Exactly, yeah.
No, I'd agree. I think Kathy Sullivan is an inspiration. You know, having been an astronaut and now doing these challenges, it just goes to show you that kind of age isn't a barrier. You know, so you can do these crazy things. I think if you're fit and healthy and you've got the right mindset, then I would go with Kathy too. That sounds like an amazing story.
So cool. McDonald's is difficult to beat, and I'm definitely going to be checking out some of Martin's videos, but this week's Geek of the Week is Kathy Sullivan. And that brings us to the end of yet another episode. Thank you once again for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, please do 3 things. Subscribe on your favourite podcast platform, leave us a review, and share it with a friend. For more episodes and bonus content, head to designspark.com/podcasts, and we'll see you all again in next week. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Cheers, guys.
See you soon.